Illustrations by Pete.
Hello everyone, welcome to another video, and this is the moment I've been waiting for. I did get a new pen delivered today, but I'm gonna have to explain this for a second. So the pen listing says ZYWL, I guess Zool, metal black brass fountain pen. Now, I thought from the look of it that it was going to be a copy of the Hungyeon Black Forest fountain pen, which I'll compare it to in just a little while. I'll show you the difference in the size and the shape. But this company, Delike, which it did not say that that's what it was, but this company apparently copies Kaweco. And I think this is supposed to be the Kaweco brass fountain pen that it was copying, but it was black, and I don't think that Kaweco makes a black brass fountain pen. It could be wrong, I'm not sure, but at least I haven't seen one. So I did not know that Delike copied Kaweco. If I would have known that, I probably would have just picked up the Kaweco because it was pretty close in price. So this thing took forever to fill. I had to pump that little piston thing quite a bit to get anything in there. It took a second, and it was a little bit wobbly. It's a little bit cheap, the converter, but all in all it wasn't too bad. It's just a little bit messy, that's all. So I used the carbon black ink. It has become one of my favorites to use. It's very, very dark. The thing is, this ink is permanent and it's not water soluble, so I can go over it with watercolor, which I like to do a lot, and it doesn't affect it at all. Now this pen is very small. Look at that. That is tiny. You have to post the cap on the back, and it screws in and it locks in very well. It's very sturdy. And it's a great size. It's a little chunky, so it feels good to hold on to. It's brass, but it's not too heavy. It feels like a solid pen. Now there's the Black Forest fountain pen, and it is just a little bit longer. The tips look very similar. The body of the Hungyeon is a little bit narrower, the Delike is a little bit thicker, but the nib is virtually the same. And I don't know if it's because of the ink, but after coloring in a lot of dark areas, it does seem to run a little dry. Of course, it's a small converter, so you'll see me run out of ink and I have to go ahead and go back and refill the converter towards the end of the drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the second part of this page, make it a full 2-page spread, try and connect it a little bit, make it feel a little bit more uniform like it's supposed to be one drawing, although towards the bottom it's a little different element in there, but I did enjoy that. So this is another thing where on the left page I really like the bottom left of the drawing, and on this one I really like the bottom of the drawing. I think it came out really nice. And if you go back for a couple of videos, I show you exactly how to use that technique, how to do that. It's very pleasant, it's nice. I changed it a little bit to make it a little bit more unique to this drawing. And then I went ahead and added like a 3-dimensional part of that, that drawing, that pattern. And I really like the way that it came out. I enjoyed it a lot. Okay, well, no one supplied me any questions for this video. So here's what I did. I went around to other art channels and I stole their viewers' questions, and I'm gonna answer those questions. And not all of them were from videos, some of them were from blogs or just people writing into different art places and asking questions. So here's the first question. How do you figure out what to work on next once you've finished a piece? Well, I have a very long list of ideas I have, and I suggest you do the same thing. Even if it's something unplanned and abstract, I still plan out what I want to work on something. Like, let me give an example. I may think to myself, you know, I haven't drawn with my glass dip pen in a while and I enjoy using it, so I'll put that on the list. Or I might have an idea to create something on black watercolor paper to see how the gouache stands out on it, or do some different experiment with it, and I put that on the list. Or I may want to create something using heavily granulating watercolors and see what I can do with that. Sometimes I'll be looking at someone else's art and I'll get inspired to try something that they're doing, and I put that on the list. Then I look at my list and I see what excites me the most at the time, and that's what I start on next. I always have something to inspire me. Okay, the second question is, how do you overcome the first page in a new sketchbook? That is usually an easy one for me. Sometimes I get a new sketchbook with something in mind that I want to put in it. For example, if I get a like a gray tone sketchbook, I already know what I want to work on in it, and I have those ideas before I get it, so I just put that first thing in there. But that's not always the case. Sometimes you just have a blank page staring at you, and I do too. So I here's what I do. To get over it, I close my eyes and I make some random marks on the page. And I actually have a video showing me doing this, but that's how I start the sketchbook, because instead of stressing out about it or going to the second page or going to the middle of the book, there's a lot of different things that people do. I just want to get that part over with because I don't want it to affect the rest of my creativity. So I close my eyes, start making some marks, and then I open my eyes and I create a doodle or something out of the marks that are already on the page. And if it doesn't come out good, it doesn't come out good. If it's good, it's good. If it sucks, it sucks. But you can always paint over it, draw over it, cut out a landscape or cut out something that's pretty from a magazine that you like, and just paste it over there, and that'll be your first page. It doesn't have to be this stressful thing. Just go ahead and do whatever you need to do to get past it and move on. Question number 3. What inspires you to create art? Well, as I've said already, I love to look at my favorite artists and be inspired by something they have produced. I also love to go outside. I think I've covered this in another video, but I love to go out and just be inspired by nature. I like to go look at moss growing on the side of a brick wall, or textures in a tree, and the swirls of rocks, and crazy looking fungus. There's a lot of crazy looking fungus out there. If you can find it, it is very inspirational, just the shapes and the texture, and that's what I look for. Okay, question number 4. How do you sell your artwork online? Well, I don't really know yet. I've made some art to give to people. I've given away some art. I made some art of my niece and my nephews, and I've given that art away. I've created a piece for a friend that I've given to them. I've created a piece for a fundraiser, but I have never personally sold a piece of art, at least not yet. I do plan on selling some art to fundraise for the things that I need for this channel, but I just have never sold any art yet. I think I need to grow the channel a little bit more to increase what the art is worth. I don't know. I don't think it's the skill level that makes the art worth money. You can disagree with that, but I think it's the desire to own the art because of the connection you feel to it and the connection you feel to the person who created it. I think that's what gives it its most value, at least to me. And I think too many artists just create art and then throw it up on Etsy or eBay to sell it without ever developing a relationship with the buyer. And I think that's a huge mistake, because at that point it's only about whether or not someone wants the painting or drawing, where they're going to hang it in their home. Is it the right subject? Is it the right size? Is it the right color? But that's only half of the equation. I want that art because I like the piece, but I also want it because I value the artist. I think that's something important. I think it's an important part of the whole process. If you just want something for your home, go buy a picture. But if you want something that represents a part of someone's life, something that they're creating, then you buy from an artist. And that's just how I feel about it. That's all. Okay, so number 5 is a big one. I hear it all the time from a lot of different people. I did make a video about it. I'll put the link below for that one. But how do you develop your art style? Well, I think it's a very interesting question. And I always go back to that same question. Do you think you need to have an art style? Now, I understand if you are a comic book artist or you're a children's illustrator, I understand you should have a style. I think it makes it recognizable that it's your illustration or it's your drawing, the way that you draw characters. I understand that, and I agree with that. I think it's, when someone is creating a story, they say, hey, look, I want that artist to illustrate my story because I really enjoy their concept. I enjoy what they're doing. Another example would be someone who does fantasy art or something like that. I get that. I really do. But when I first got back into art, first I started drawing comic characters, and then I moved on to landscapes, and then I moved into wildlife art, then I developed that into wildlife portraits, and now I do mostly abstract art. But I've realized that I don't need to pick a style. I just create what I want to create, and I'll do it in a way that only I can do it. And some people narrow themselves down so that, to a specific topic or a specific medium, and they just kind of stick themselves in that groove and never get out of it. And it's not because of a profession or something like that. It's just because that's what they do. They think they're supposed to, and that's what they do. And that's okay if that's what you want to do, but if you feel stuck doing that, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Maybe you should not be worrying so much about your style, or if you want to experiment with a style, create a series of paintings or a series of drawings. Maybe you do that and it's all of that style and it's just that series of stuff, and you can move on to something else and expand a little bit. I think it's very fun for me to experiment with things and not get stuck doing the same thing over and over and over, even though, like I said, now I'm doing a lot more experimental abstract stuff, but I still do different styles of it all the time. And I still draw birds and do landscapes. I still love to do that stuff, and I still do it. I just don't hold myself to it. I do whatever I want to do at the time I want to do it. Okay, question number 6. What do you try to say with your art, or what is your art trying to say to other people? That's a very simple question for me. Nothing. The only thing that my art is really trying to say is that I hope you find this interesting to look at. There is no philosophy, there's no deep-seated political meanings, there's no life-altering epiphanies. It's just abstract art, or it's just a picture of a bird, or just a landscape. I just want it to be interesting to look at, and that's because that's the art that I enjoy. I don't want to read a novel to understand what someone's art means. And I hope this doesn't sound mean, but I really don't care. I know that sounds a little harsh, but I hope it doesn't sound too bad. I appreciate the art and I appreciate the artist, but I just want to look at something and say, wow, that's really interesting to me. And I can just stare at it for hours and look at the different shapes or textures, or maybe the way that they frame something, or I just like that. Like, I'm really big into like Salvador Dali and even Rembrandt. I love Rembrandt. I could stare at Rembrandt's paintings forever because they're just so interesting to look at, the way that he used light. And it's just, I like art that's interesting. That's just my opinion. And I want to grab someone's attention with that. I want them to look at what I'm doing and say, wow, that's interesting. That looks interesting. And if they ask me, what does it mean? I'll have to tell them it doesn't really mean anything. I wanted you to think it was interesting. And that's really all I have. So, but some artists write a book about their art. You go to some like modern art, and you see this thing, and it's like a red rectangle with a green triangle, and then next to it is a book that explains what those two things, and I don't have patience for that. I know everybody likes to think that they are deep and they are wise and they have all this knowledge to pass on to people, but really, maybe you should be writing if you have all that information to pass on to people, because if you're not going to catch their attention with that. If you really want to say the things that you're talking about, then just say the things you're talking about. Don't make them so obscure that someone has to read a novel to understand the art. It just doesn't make sense to me. But if that's what you do, that's what you do. And this is just one person's opinion. You do whatever you want to do. And that's it. That's how it is. Okay, question 7 is the most important question I'm going to ask. It's not the last question, but it's the most important one. How do you sell an invisible sculpture for $18,000? Now look, I don't know, but if you figure it out, I have so many of these things that I have nowhere else to put them. So I need to get rid of these as quick as possible. If you figure out how to sell the invisible sculptures, I'll give you half of all the money I get selling my invisible sculptures. I mean, I can't even move in this place. Alright, next question. So this question is, do you listen to music or ebooks while you draw and paint? Yes and yes. Usually it's music. And that's just what I do. But occasionally I will listen to everything from ebooks to lectures to debates to podcasts. And that might sound very non-creative, especially the lectures and debates part, but it's not really supposed to be inspiring when I'm doing that. What it's doing is it's occupying my mind so that I can draw and paint without getting inside my own head and being overly critical of what I'm creating. So, and that's a problem for me sometimes. And there's plenty of time to do that when I'm done with it. And I've said that before too. I like to critique my work when I'm done with it. And then when I'm creating it, just create it. I'll critique it later. And sometimes I like to keep my mind busy with those things. But usually it is just music, and I just get into a groove with music and just enjoy it. On that subject, I have a earworm. I do have a song stuck in my head, and I don't know where it came from. I don't know where I heard it last, but it is, do you know the Rubber Band Man from the Spinners? And if you have ever heard that song, and I don't even know if that's what it's actually called, but that's the lyric. Do you know the Rubber Band Man? And the song was written before I was even born, but that song gets stuck in my head, and I've been singing it for days now, and I cannot get it out of my head. But it's a song that if you listen to it, it just makes you want to move a little bit. And I don't like dancing at all. I don't ever dance, but I will bop my head and scoot in my chair and just get into that song, and I don't know why. It's just an old song, but it's very catchy. Okay, I think we're up to question number 9. Will you still be making YouTube videos in 10 years? Well, that's the plan. If YouTube is still allowing me to make videos, I will continue to make them until there's a reason I can't. I plan on turning this into a full-time gig, so there you have it. I want this to be what I do for a profession. And so, in that case, yes, I will still be making videos. Okay, question 10. What is the biggest mistake you see people make with art as they are learning? And that is an excellent question. So, I think one of the biggest mistakes is also a necessary mistake to make. And this is just my opinion, but the thinking is that there's only one way of doing something. I think that's the mistake, is that if you try and think that there's only one way, or if you're taught that there's only one way to do something. However, why is that a necessary mistake? Because in order to learn how to do something differently than you know, you first have to know something. So you need to pour yourself into a method and really grasp that and understand it before you can change it up, or maybe mix another method into that method to make it your own method. It's very difficult when you're learning from one person. They tell you this is exactly how you do this, and you do it every time until you come across someone who does it just a little bit different. And you say, well, I didn't know that there was another way to do that. And they say, yeah, this is how I've always done it. So then maybe they've never tried anything else. But you can see, hey, that's how that's done. And it just creates if I blend the old with the new and I just modify it to work for me, I can come up with my own way of doing something. And then any person that you'll show that method, and they'll think that that's the only method until they come across something, or unless you tell them. But I think that's a necessary mistake that someone has to go through. I want to make a second one for this, because I think this is also very important, and that is, I don't think people should shy away from looking at reference photos and thinking that they're not a real artist unless they can draw and paint from memory. And that is a big myth. I've heard that from so many people. Some of the best artists I know have a reference photo next to them while they're drawing and painting. they're amazing artists, and the detail that they put in their painting or drawing is not in that photo. But it's just a reference. It's just something to look at to say, let's see how this works, or how does this composition feel? And they use that, or maybe they're looking, how does this feather tuck under this feather? Well, you got to have that reference in front of you to see it. Maybe you've never drawn that thing before. Maybe you've never painted that thing before. And even if you have, maybe there's a new thing that you find in that photo. There's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If someone tells you something's wrong with that, they're just trying to play up their own ego. Maybe they don't use photo reference anymore. But that you can never stop using photo reference and be just as good of an artist as anyone else who doesn't use that. So I think that's the second biggest mistake. Well, I had a blast answering these questions for you. I know that they were not your questions, but they were questions that someone else had, and that's pretty much how all the questions typically are on a video anyway. It's not all your questions anyway. But if you would like to submit some questions to me, please do that below. You can do that in the comments, or you can email me, and below you'll find my email address. You can just send me some questions. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to answer some of your questions instead of some strangers' questions. Well, I guess technically you would be a stranger unless I don't. Maybe I know you. Maybe I don't know you and you're a stranger. But if you start asking me questions, we can develop a relationship, and then you're no longer a stranger. So there's just another reason to ask some questions. So thank you very much for a wonderful time, and we should do this again sometime. I'll call you. This is always the awkward part of the video when we have to part, but here's a few more videos that you may enjoy if you want to keep hearing me talk, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.